Hey everyone, so I just got my second and final cybersecurity certification for the year. It was the OSWP this time, and just like with my previous two certifications, I will give you a review of my experience with it, what I liked and what I didn't, plus some tips in case you want to get this certification for yourself. Alright, so let's start by discussing what is the OSWP first of all. And putting simply, it is OFSEC's Wi-Fi Penetration Tester certification. And it comes with the PEN 210 course, which will teach you all the necessary techniques and theory in order to pass the certification exam itself. So the main objectives of the certification is to, first of all, to understand all the different Wi-Fi standards there is, like how the authentication mechanisms work and that kind of stuff. You will also learn the tools of the trade, like AirCrack, AirGaddon, native Linux CLI tools, these kind of utilities. And most important of all, to identify and to exploit Wi-Fi vulnerabilities. So regarding the exam, it is a practical exam, much like the OSWP. We have a practical portion that consists of a mock Wi-Fi pen testing engagement that is 3 hours and 45 minutes long. And then you get an additional 24 hours for preparing and submitting a engagement report after the fact. So you conduct this mock engagement through a remote Kali VM that the exam environment will provide to you. And you have 3 access points to compromise. So pay attention, we have 1 access point which will be mandatory. You must compromise it in order to pass the certification exam. But you also have 2 more access points, and you only need to compromise either on. You could compromise both, but you only need to compromise one. And of course, much like other OFSEC exams, you will need a proof of compromise through a flag, which you can get after compromising the AP. And regarding the access points that you have to compromise, they can be WPA 1 or 2 in either enterprise or personal mode, or they can be WEP, and they can have WPS enabled or disabled. I'm saying that because those are all the different combinations of access points you encounter through the course. So these are the targets that you might find in the exam. And if you don't know what those acronyms mean, don't worry, you will if you go through the certification course. Alright, so now I will give you my actual review of my experience with the exam. And as I'm doing that, I will also give you some tips for you to use during the preparation or during the exam itself. So this is a new format. I'm trying to give tips as I'm explaining my experience with the certification. So let's get started. Alright, so regarding the syllabus or content of the course, it all starts with some Wi-Fi theory, some lower level stuff like how Wi-Fi works on a physical level, and then more like stuff on packages and authentication mechanisms, cryptography. It is very dry, and much of it doesn't really have a practical tie-in. So it's more theory for theory's sake. It's not really super related to any particular exploitation technique. Is just so that the student understands somewhat deeply how the wireless technology works. Then it covers the many tools for the job. It covers AirCrack, which will be the main tool you'll likely use throughout this certification exam. You also learn Wireshark and Kismet, and as I said before, also the native Linux CLI tools for engaging with Wi-Fi networks. And then more towards the end, you will also learn attacking techniques on the different Wi-Fi or access point standards that you will encounter throughout this certification. Overall, there's a lot of theory that is presented right at the beginning, which can be somewhat overwhelming and a bit boring, but then it gets easier once you start getting some practical experience with exploitation and stuff. Now, the tip I have to give to pair with my review of the syllabus is that not all the modules that make up the course are strictly necessary, especially so if you come like me from a computer science background, so you somewhat understand how Wi-Fi works. You're not completely brand new to WPA and WAP, and you understand cryptography. So there are certain modules that you will definitely want to pay close attention to, and these are the ones I am listing right here. So first of all, Aircrack and G Essentials, cracking authentication hashes, attacking WPS networks, rogue access points, attacking WPA enterprise, and manual network connections. As you can see, pretty much all of them are related to either learning how to use a tool or some practical techniques in order to exploit or to connect to a Wi-Fi network. So it is absolutely essential. There are some that are nice to have, like attacking captive portals, Barricap Essentials, and Kismet Essentials. The reasoning for me putting Kismet and Barricap as nice to have, not essential, is because you could use Aircrack and G for everything during the exam or during the course. That's what I did. But the course will give you some other alternatives for tools, which is good because you shouldn't rely on just one tool. So it is good to know different tools for the job. But if you just know Aircrack and G, that should be enough. So it is a nice to have. Similarly, attacking captive portals, it is a exploitive technique. It is a vulnerability to exploit, but it is not something that can be, in my opinion, easily mimicked during a exam. It is somewhat more of a social engineering attack rather than a technical exploit. So I didn't pay much attention on it, and it is not as I think on the same level as the other techniques on the course. And all the other modules are just theory. You can skip them if you already know the theory behind them, but if you don't, I recommend that you at least go through it so that you can reference it later if needed. Now back to the review. I just covered the structure of the course, and now I'd like to talk about the actual techniques taught by the course. So the course covers the usage of basic tools, as I said, Aircrack and G, Kismet, native Linux tools, and it also teaches you how to compromise WAP, WPA 1 and 2 in either personal or enterprise mode, and WPS. And it also teaches you some social engineering attacks such as fake captive portals. So about what is not covered, I am not an expert on Wi-Fi pen testing, far from it, but I do know a few techniques by name that I noticed that are absent from the course. Notably, there is no mention of WPA3 exploitation, such as Dragon Blood or downgrade attacks. There's also not a mention of automation tools, which makes sense because as this is a certification exam, they want to certify that you know how to exploit a target by understanding how it works and not just by being a script kiddie and running a command. So it makes sense that there's no, it doesn't teach you how to use automation tools, but in the job you would likely use it. And also there's probably a ton of other modern techniques that are not taught in this course. So my conclusion is that this is a primer on Wi-Fi hacking. It will teach you how to hack older standards such as WAP and WPA, and WPS it is still used, but so it is a relatively modern technique, but it is not really cutting edge. So you will not learn how to exploit WPA3 access points, which is becoming the norm. So my advice here is that the fact that not a lot of techniques are taught during the course actually works in our favor, because that means there are not a lot of techniques that can be expected from you during the exam. And I counted, and in my opinion, there are only 5 techniques that you need to know in order to pass the OSWP exam. So I will go over them one by one. The first one is to be able to connect to access points via the command line interface on Linux. So you must be able to connect to open networks, that is networks with no authentication mechanisms. You must be able to connect to WAP and to WPA in either enterprise or personal mode. So that would be the first technique, fairly simple. And you will also need to know how to do a WAP IV attack. If you go through the course, you will understand how this works, not a big deal. You will also need to know how to do a handshake crack in order to get the password for a WPA access point in personal mode. And you also need to know how to do rogue access point attacks in order to compromise WPA networks in either management, enterprise or personal mode. And lastly, you must learn the WPS attacks covered in the course, which is the Pixie attack and the Pin brute force attack. So as you can see, it is not a lot. It is more about deeply understanding these techniques and knowing what to do in case something goes wrong as you're employing them. It is not about learning like a million different techniques. So as you go through the course, work on your notes and your field manual, as I often say, to be able to have the commands ready to conduct any of these 5 techniques. If you can do that, then you are, in my opinion, very well prepared for take the exam. Just 5 techniques. Back to the review, what I'm about to discuss right now is, in my opinion, the single worst aspect of this course, which is the fact that unlike the OSWP, and I assume most OffSec certifications, there are no practical labs in the course material. So instead of having a VM that you can boot up and try the technique taught in a module, the course will literally recommend you to go ahead and buy a router or get an old router and set it up to be a WEP or a WPA or whatever access point in order to try the technique that you learn on it. And of course, you will also need to buy a Wi-Fi antenna in order to get in packet injection mode to be able to conduct these techniques. So it is crazy that the burden to find a place to practice is on these students when you're paying like top dollar to be able to get into this certification, which is not cheap. But yeah, OffSec will not give you a place to practice these techniques. You must find one by yourself. Having said that, there is one very good piece of advice I can give you, which is to use WiFiChallenge Lab to practice the techniques taught in the OSWP course. So if you don't know what WiFiChallenge Lab is, it is, to my knowledge, a community effort to provide a free resource to learn Wi-Fi hacking for cybersecurity students. It is very simple. You just go to the website, you download a VM file that you can spin up in a virtualization software like VirtualBox or something, and then you log in and you'll find yourself inside a Ubuntu VM, which has a bunch of simulated Wi-Fi networks, Wi-Fi access points, in the same way that you will find once you start the exam and you're working inside the Kali VM that they provide you. So by doing that, you can pretty much get the practical labs that the course material lacks. So what I would recommend for you to do is to first complete the course and take good notes on the different techniques. After you're done, you boot up the WiFiChallenge VM, and then you want to compromise these following access points: Wi-Fi old, Wi-Fi mobile, and Wi-Fi corp. The reason I am listing these access points to you is that WiFiChallenge Lab actually teaches you and prepares you for a larger variety of Wi-Fi hacking techniques. So if you just go blind and start trying to compromise any Wi-Fi that you can reach, it is possible that you will find a access point that you cannot exploit using the techniques taught by OSWP. So if you stick to these 3 access points and if you can compromise them easily, I can give you my vote of confidence that you will be able to pass the OSWP exam. Alright, so now let's review my experience during the exam. So it took me just under 60 minutes to compromise the first access point, which, as you remember, is the access point that you must compromise in order to pass the exam, and about 45 minutes to compromise the second access point. So just under 2 hours, I had already passed the certification exam because I had compromised the mandatory access point and one of the 2 optional access points, the ones that you have to compromise at least one to pass. But to my surprise, I couldn't compromise access point number 3. And that definitely came as a shock because Of course, I can't talk about the details of the exam, but when I first started, I was sure that the access point number 3 was the easiest one and the one I would have the least difficulty with, but it was not the case. I just tried to conduct the techniques as I had written down in my field manual, and as I had tested on WiFiChallenge Lab, but it just didn't work. And I believe it wasn't a issue of the exam infrastructure or a bug or anything of the sort. I do believe it was somewhat intentional by OPSEC, or at least that's what I hope. So yeah, I just couldn't get the last flag of the exam, which was surprising. So now here's my advice so that what happened to me won't happen to you, and you will finish the exam with all access points compromised so that you have the bragging rights. And my advice would be to focus on the troubleshooting, because the exam material will at times have a separate section about troubleshooting techniques, and you should pay attention to it. Wi-Fi hacking is by nature a little finicky because there are issues of hardware and issue of drivers on Linux, so it can be somewhat prone to failure. So you should be able to diagnose and solve any issues with your commands on the fly. So as I said, I failed the access point number 3 because my commands didn't work. So I think that this portion of the exam was designed to test whether I was able to troubleshoot on the fly. And as it appears, I was not capable. I tried for a little while, but I'll be honest, I got a little bored and I had stuff to do. I had already passed, so as usual, I didn't follow OPSEC's mantra of try harder. I just gave up and went on with my day, and I'm glad I did. But it is a possibility that the exam is actively trying to test whether you can troubleshoot on the fly, so beware of that. Now back to the review, and still on the topic of time. As I mentioned before, the exam is 3 hours and 45 minutes long, which is much shorter than the OSWP, which was my previous certification. So I was a little apprehensive about this short exam duration. I thought that it might be an issue, but as I said before, I passed the exam in less than 2 hours, so it wasn't an issue for me. But there were some delays due to technical issues. The OSWP, just like the OSWP, and I believe most, if not all, of OPSEC certifications are proctored, which means that once you start the exam, there will be a person watching you through your webcam and watching your screen through a browser screen share feature. And this feature gave me some trouble. The person on the other end couldn't see what I was doing with my computer, so I couldn't start the exam until the issue was resolved. And it took me, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or maybe longer to get this issue solved. Since I finished the exam early with plenty of time to spare, I don't know what would have happened if I had run out of time. Would the OPSEC employee give me my 20 minutes back due to technical issues, or would they not give me back because they would argue that it was an issue on my end? I don't know, but do keep that in mind. Since the exam duration is short, delays like that can be an issue. So my opinion and my advice regarding this shorter exam duration is that almost 4 hours for the exam is more than enough time if everything goes smoothly, as it did for the first and the second access point in my experience. As I mentioned, I was able to compromise both of them in under 2 hours, so I only used less than half of the allotted time for the exam. So it wasn't an issue for me, but it may not be enough time if everything goes wrong, as it did for my third access point. Just imagine if my first and my second access point also gave me some issues. It may not have been enough time to compromise the access points required to pass the exam. So my suggestion, my recommendation for you who is going to take the exam is the same regarding on which scenario you will face, which is you should first aim to compromise the first access point first of all, because, as I mentioned, it is the only required access point for you to compromise. So if you cannot do it, then you cannot pass the exam. So it really doesn't make sense for you to do anything else besides compromise the first access point when you first start the exam. After that, you should try either the second or the third access point for 1 hour to see if you can compromise it. If you can, then great. You compromise the first access point, you compromise either of the second or the third, then you're done with the exam if you want. You could end your attempt early and you will be able to pass. But if you spend 1 hour on it and you cannot compromise, don't worry, just switch to the other access point and try for 1 more hour. And if you even cannot do that, then you switch back and you keep alternating between one of the two. I say that because the access point I couldn't compromise, the access point number 3, was the one I tried first, even before the access point number 1. And I tried it for 1 hour, and then I was a little panicky because oh man, if this one was supposed to be the easiest one of all in my estimation, and I can't compromise it, maybe I won't be able to pass the exam. But then I switched to the other access points and was able to compromise it pretty easily. So don't get stuck on an unnecessary access point. Remember, you have some leeway in what you need to compromise in order to pass the exam. First, access point number 1, then go to, after the other 2, go alternating 1 hour, half an hour, whatever you prefer. But my advice is not to get laser focused on an unnecessary target. So what is my conclusion regarding the OSWP certification? First of all, it is a reasonably low commitment certification. I studied it throughout 2, maybe 3 weeks, so it wasn't a huge time commitment, which is good. And it will expand your skill set if you're coming from the OSWP or the CPTS like myself, because those certifications will not teach you Wi-Fi pen testing at all. And it can be debated whether Wi-Fi pen testing is a super useful skill to have or not, but in any case, it is an expansion of your existing skill set, which is always good. The techniques covered are not really cutting edge, as I mentioned before. It will not teach you how to compromise modern standards like WPA3 and stuff, but it is a good primer on Wi-Fi pen testing skills. And WPA2 is a still used, WEP not so much, but it's a nice technique to have under your belt. The course, I'm sorry to say, is fairly mediocre, and I say that mostly because of the lack of practical labs, which is, in my opinion, unforgivable, especially when considering that this course is expensive. This certification is expensive, like most, if not all, of OFSEC certifications, so it should have some practical labs included in it. So yeah, that's my overall sentiment towards the certification. It is a nice to have, but it is not really worth the price tag. Having said that, do I recommend it? And I would only recommend it to you if, first of all, you have access to the Learn One subscription from OFSEC, which will give you access to this course and the certification for free, in which case, why not? Or if someone else is paying the course for you, which was the case for me. My company sponsored this certification. Actually, they sponsored the Learn One subscription for me to get the OSWP, so the OSWP was a freebie. And the last possible scenario I could see this course being a good recommendation would it be if you want to be a Wi-Fi pen tester and you are rich and you want to spend your money on this, let's say, subpar course. Otherwise, I would recommend you to try the Hack the Box Academy Wi-Fi pen tester path. I haven't tested it for myself because it is also expensive, but much less expensive than the OSWP. And you could also try going through the WiFiChallenge Labs, which is, as I said before, a free resource. And they also have a certification, the CWP, which I believe it stands for Certified WiFiChallenge Pen Tester, Professional, one of the two. I will have it on the screen if you want to see it. I haven't tried the certification myself. I haven't read reviews on it, but it is something to try if you really want to become a Wi-Fi pen tester. And to finish this off, I would like to recommend you some resources in case you are thinking of pursuing the certification for yourself. The last two resources linked here are from other people, which I referenced during my studying for the certification, and I will link it in the description. But the first one is a resource created by myself, actually, which is my field manual, which, as I discussed in other videos, is essentially my hacker notes, which I referenced during my CTF challenges, during my real-life pen testing engagements, that sort of stuff. So if you go to field-manual.brunorochamora.com, you'll see my field manual here. It is still in beta, so I haven't publicly released this yet, but as a freebie for people who watch the video until the very end, you will now know about this resource, which you can use. So if you go in the search bar on the top right, or just press Ctrl-K, you can search for instance, WEP, and you will see the note cracking web authentication. So if you go here, there will be an overview of this web cracking technique and a cheat sheet of commands for you to use during your exam or doing some CTF challenge or whatever. All the notes reference, or at least can reference other notes. So you can see here, there's a hyperlink to AirCrackNG suite setup. So you can reference this as well, or you can go to the Wi-Fi monitoring and see all the different commands to monitor Wi-Fi networks. And there's a bunch of stuff. You can go to service enumeration, how to enumerate FTP, or how to enumerate Kerberos, or whatever. You see my point. So this is a good resource, in my opinion, that you can use during the certification exam, or doing your CTF, or doing your job, or whatever. So yeah, that was it from me. I hope you have enjoyed this video. This was my last certification for 2025, but I intend to pursue the OSWP in, let's say, January 2026. So I'll keep you guys posted about that. And speaking of posting, I intend to post much more frequently to this channel in 2026. So if you're interested in cybersecurity, career advice, and hacking content in general, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in 2026. Bye bye.